Hey there, do you like nostalgia? Do you like having best friends? Do you like it when people make fun of each other and make comments on podcasts that, if were to ever see the light of day, might ruin their chances for a public state of office? Well, then you've come to the right place to What an Oddcast, where we run a show where, why don't you just go ahead and take this example here and why don't you come check us out? Have a good one now.
She's cooking dinner because she knows her place.
Well, I'm gonna clip that.
I'm gonna that back for her, please. Can we go ahead and add that to the new intro, just right at the very end?
The Murder Shelf Book Club contains disturbing content related to real-life crimes. Listener discretion is advised. Single or isolated examples of James Holmes's behavior or appearance are woefully inadequate for understanding the whole person. Jimmy was not one-dimensional. His mental problems, which indeed have been present since late childhood, influenced his adolescence, but they did not overwhelm it. There were times when his emotional foibles faded into the background, when the healthier part of Jimmy's mind took over, when his emotional defenses did their jobs effectively, when life was good. From A Dark Night in Aurora, Inside James Holmes and the Colorado Mass Shooting by Dr. William H. Reed, M.D. Well, welcome to the Murder Shelf Book Club podcast. I am your host, Jill. We are starting a new book trilogy. This is part 1, episode 130, Just Wanted to Keep It Private, featuring A Dark Night in Aurora, Inside James Holmes and the Colorado Mass Shooting by Dr. William H. Reed, M.D., published in 2018. Another valuable source I used was by Dr. Lynn Fenton, the therapist of James Holmes, during graduate school before the shooting. Her book, Aurora, the psychiatrist who treated the movie theater killer, was released in 2022. Both are remarkable and contributed differently towards our understanding of what led up to and took place in Aurora, Colorado, on July 20th, 2012, and how it rippled across the lives of those sucked into this horror. I will be in Aurora, Colorado soon because I will be on Creators Row for Crimecon 2025 Denver, just 4 weeks out. I will be at the Embers Lodge Bar Friday night at 9 p.m. Now, if you still need a Crimecon badge, use my code, one word, all lowercase letters, Murder Shelf, and go to www.crimecon.com/CC25. Now, presenting at Crimecon this year are the Aurora Police Department's own Captain Jad Lanigan and Commander Mike Daly. So this will be an important trilogy for you to hear before attending Crimecon. Long trip to Denver? We'll download these episodes and listen on the way. And I'd like to shout out to my new murder bookies. RSJDCMTK, Russ Weber, Diane V. Smith 9, Elizabeth Jansen, Christy Lawton, Crystal Merritt, Jen Frederick, Steve McFadden, Elena Metzger, Amy McFadden, and I want to say hi to my new Patreon murder bookies, Erica, Sadie, Michelle, Kylie, Mary Ann, CMKS, Ramirez Jr., C. Woodward, T. King, Julia Cowley from the Consult, and Jake Mack. We really had quite an influx, so if I missed you, I apologize. email me at jill@murdershelfbookclub.com or just message me on Patreon. Also, I will be teaching my serial killer class on Patreon once a month. So join us in 2 weeks on August 14th, 2025, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We will discuss and select our next book and then delve into the class. I really can't wait. All right, spotlighting our author, Dr. William H. Reed, MD, is a seasoned forensic mental health professional. He has testified in numerous courts for both prosecutors and defense attorneys and has received prestigious awards for his writing and contributions to forensic psychiatric education. With decades of experience, including 8 years as the Texas State Medical Director for Mental Health, Dr. Reed has published 17 books. He lives in Horseshoe Bay, Texas, where he has composed a symphony and several songs, earning 3 Texas Music Award nominations. Interesting guy, right? In the case of the people of the state of Colorado versus James Holmes, Dr. Reed served as one of 2 psychiatric experts, reviewing 75,000 documents and conducting 9 interviews with Holmes over a year. Additionally, I'd like to recognize Carrie Drobin, Dr. Lynn Fenton's co-author, who is an award-winning true crime author, attorney, podcaster, and journalist, with works featured on American Greed, Netflix, and A&E's Secrets of Hell's Angels. Dr. Fenton has maintained her privacy since all of this, and I respect that. So as we kick into our book club trilogy, it is time to talk about food. Colorado offers a fantastic array of culinary options, and Aurora boasts a very eclectic palate. So for today, I am bringing bacon-wrapped jalapeno poppers. I had never made them myself until now. I always bought them in the box at the store or ordered them in a restaurant. And after this, I will always make them from scratch. So you take cream cheese and cheddar cheese, and you mix it up, cut the peppers in half, clean out all the crap, and load it up with the cheese. You rejoin the halves, and then you wrap the bacon around them. You bake for 25 minutes, let them cool a little bit, and you are ready to go. I like dipping them in ranch dressing, but feel free to use your preferred dipping sauce. Now, these poppers are wonderful with a light white wine, so I have chosen Dave Harvey Columbia Valley Riesling 2022 from Naked Wines. Refreshing for summer, it is sweet and balances out the acidity nicely. It features flavors like ripe peach and candied apple. Warning, one sip leads to another. Yeah. All right, as a Naked Wines Angel, you can get it for just $11.99, which is a great quality for the price. So bon appetit, murder bookies, and let book club begin. So Dr. Reed opens his book by highlighting the devastating impact of active shooters, which leave people dead, countless injured, and many with PTSD. While physical wounds may heal, emotional scars linger, altering lives forever. And he emphasizes that the reason this book exists is because James Holmes was captured alive. Now, this compelled me to do some research on active shooters as an incident of targeted violence carried out by one or more shooters in a populated area, causing multiple casualties and possibly fatalities. It may not seem like it, but the good news is the FBI's 2024 report indicates that such incidents dropped 50% from 2023 to 2024. I hope that trend continues. Locations and victims may be randomly selected or may have some symbolic value for the perpetrators. And shootings may occur in as little as a few minutes to 24 hours. Oh, and I'm not talking about any gang or terrorist or targeted militancy-related cases. 50% of these events occur in open spaces, like parks or malls with lots of people around. 17% take place in commerce, which are business spaces that are not necessarily open to pedestrians. 17% occur in schools or residences, and 12% occur in church or government buildings. Handguns are the chosen weapon of choice in 59% of cases, with 31% choosing rifles and 10% are shotguns. 34% of cases involve multiple weapons, and we'll see that James Holmes is one of these. Of the shooters, 56% were apprehended, 20% were killed, and 24% committed suicide. 60% of shooting incidents were over by the time police arrived on the scene, literally minutes later. And 54% of these perpetrators are white, with an overwhelming 94% being male. Now, since 1966, mass public shootings have resulted in, on average, 3.4 people killed, with 5.3 injured at each event, suggesting a higher likelihood of injury. Also good news. So the chance of your being a victim in a mass shooting is very low. Although it may seem like these things happen constantly, the data shows that this is rare. In our information processing, so how we think, human beings use heuristics. They're mental shortcuts that help us to process information. The availability heuristic relies on our ability to easily recall examples. Like you hear about an active shooter situation in the news, which reminds us of the previous mass shooting we heard about, and we think, oh my God, this happens all the time, I remember. But this is a cognitive bias, and it creates false assumptions. There's other heuristics, such as anchoring, where we over-rely on the first piece of information we receive. And that's why relying on the data is crucial, which is why I'm sharing it with you. So with that context, here we go. James Egan Holmes was born on December 13th, 1987, at Scripps Memorial Hospital in La Jolla, California, via C-section. Arlene, his mom, was a nurse at Scripps, and Robert Holmes, called Bob, were thrilled to welcome their first child and the first grandchild on both sides. Named after Robert's uncle, Egan came from Arlene's maiden name. And there was great hope for this little boy called Jimmy. His grandfather was a West Point alumnus with a distinguished military career. His grandmother served as a governor for the Monterey Bay colony of Mayflower descendants. They were a good family with the normal amounts of alcoholic and emotional issues and bouts of depression tossed in. When Jimmy was 7, his family moved from San Diego to Oak Hills, California, to take care of an ill grandmother. Bob began working in statistical forecasting with the Armed Forces Vocational Aptitude Battery, evaluating test results for enlistees. They lived comfortably in a one-story ranch house on a cul-de-sac where the neighborhood kids played basketball and captured the flag. As an adult, James recalled making mud pies and jumping in a mud hole with his little sister, describing an everyday, normal, happy family without any history of abuse or violence. Dr. Lynn Fenton, his psychologist while in grad school, writes that Jimmy was 8 years old when he punched his 3-year-old sister in the face, enough to turn it purple. Well, concerned about his behavior, his parents took him to a therapist named John Adams. Although Jimmy was doing well in school, he was described as being, quote, very Nintendo-oriented, socialized poorly at home, and sometimes through stuffed animals, end quote. While he was generally quiet, he played well with his sister. Counselor Adams made some recommendations regarding discipline and addressed the differences in parenting styles of Bob and Arlene. To ensure the counseling sessions would be covered by insurance, Adams diagnosed Jimmy with oppositional defiant disorder, a somewhat generic diagnosis at the time. After 3 visits, a significant improvement was noted in Jimmy's behavior, and counseling ended. Dr. Reed would review these files and noted that nothing in this early record raises any significant concerns. It is common for children to throw things and to behave differently at home compared to being at school or with friends, and this behavior is not a cause for alarm. When in elementary school, Jimmy consistently made the honor roll. His teachers described him as, quote, intelligent, smiling, active, helpful, and sweet, end quote. And he received a 100% attendance award. Popular, friendly, Jimmy and a friend wrote code creating a class website. Now, the Holmes family enjoyed trips to Disneyland, the beach, skiing, camping. They have photos of Jimmy and his little sister at the ocean, an aquarium, at a wildlife park, making wonderful memories like snorkeling in Hawaii and having super soaker fights. They also visited Uncle Dexter and Aunt Terry in Chico, California, where they went horseback riding and fishing. And if Chico, California sounds familiar, this city played a role in the Yuba County 5 case, which I covered in my interview with Tony Wright, episode 125. As parents, Bob and Arlene were affectionate and cared deeply for each other, always avoiding conflicts in front of their children. They instilled a strong work ethic in their kids while ensuring they had dinner together at the kitchen table every night. Bob coached Jimmy's soccer team, which Jimmy loved, and they attended their kids' school concerts. Jimmy also played basketball, kickball, practiced martial arts, and ran track. There are photos of him with medals, and his friends remember him as a team player and a good sport who never sulked after a loss. Naturally shy, Jimmy shunned the spotlight, much like his dad. Now, the family was not touchy-feely. They didn't discuss emotions very much. And Bob once said, quote, we were more scientific, non-emotional, end quote. When adult James reflected on his early days, he provided short, clipped, superficial responses. His most significant emotional memory was enjoying ice cream, which he described as good, a clear indicator of his flat affect. He remembered his mom dyeing Easter eggs and cooking spaghetti and her laughter as she tested it to see if it was ready by throwing a piece against the cabinet, which it stuck to, tearing off the paint. Jimmy was a patient and caring brother to his little sister, even if she was occasionally annoying, a sentiment that every older sibling can relate to. I sure can. Chris remembers playing fetch with their dog, a Labrador named Zuby, and the secret treehouse that Jimmy and some friends had built in the woods. He loved animals, including their Scotty, Wimbley. However, when it came time for their beloved pet to be put down, Jimmy was completely unprepared. A vet came to the house to perform the procedure, and a shocked, upset Jimmy retreated, climbing a tree where he cried alone. As an adult, James admitted that he never discussed this experience, keeping it tucked away deep inside just because he wanted to keep it private. Sharing feelings was not a priority in the Holmes family. Aurora, Colorado, July 20th, 2012, just after midnight. Alex Tivis, age 24, and his girlfriend, Amanda Lindgren, attended the midnight showing of The Dark Knight Rises at Century 16 Theaters in Aurora, Colorado. A huge fan of Spider-Man and the Arizona Wildcats basketball, Alex loved Amanda deeply. He had just gotten his MA in psychology, and his life was just really about to begin. His friend Caitlin remembered, quote, He could make us all laugh with his Gollum impression, end quote. 15 minutes into the film, shots rang out as chaos erupted in the theater. Alex instinctively dove to protect Amanda, telling her to stay down. Tragically, he was struck in the forehead by a bullet, killing him instantly. Amanda said, quote, "My baby didn't hesitate. He just protected me," end quote. His father, Tom Tevis, described Alex as irreplaceable, quote, "one of the best people on earth," end quote. The Tevis family would release a statement highlighting Alex's last act of heroism, demonstrating his character, selflessness, and compassion. Following his death, Amanda honored Alex by taking the last name Tevis with the family's blessing. In Oak Hills, neighbors Lori and Mark Bidwell met the Holmes family, with their son becoming best buds with little Chris. They noted that, quote, "Bob was reserved, very quiet. Jimmy was shy and laid back, but could open up once he got to know you," end quote. Jimmy had a great sense of humor and was open with those he knew well. Neighbors Catherine and Mark Barrett, who lived nearby, described Jimmy as, quote, "a gentleman, sweet, a very happy boy, fitting in well," end quote. He was considerate, including younger kids in their games, and avoided disagreements. So overall, Jimmy Holmes appears to be a normal, if tad shy, boy. They lived in Oak Hills for 5 years when both Bob and Arlene realized that they missed having family nearby. So in 2000, when Jimmy was 12, the family moved back to San Diego. From that point on, a noticeable change in Jimmy's behavior occurred. His parents saw him becoming more withdrawn. Later on, Dr. Reed would learn that troubling thoughts were beginning to affect him. Adult James would look back on these preteen years, acknowledging a disconnect between his outward behavior and how others perceived him with his internal dialogue, because Jimmy was now thinking about killing people. Yeah. Adult James mentioned that at age 10, he occasionally had vague images he called nuclear bombs intruding into his thoughts, right before he went to sleep or during quiet moments. He kept this to himself because he wasn't that worried about it. Dr. Reed extensively explains that young minds experience a lot while growing up as they developed psychological coping mechanisms for their fears and their wishes. Many of us have fleeting thoughts like, "Oh, I wish my baby brother would disappear." Well, that might be somewhat unsettling, but it's not really unusual. The reality is that most of our memories before age 5 are non-existent. We really haven't developed the language necessary to encode memory yet. Many memories of our early thoughts remain unconscious, and even when we're aware of them, they tend to fade as our brains mature. False memories can form after repeatedly viewing videos or photographs of ourselves as toddlers during a family trip. We swear we remember this, but the truth is we don't. These are false memories. And our recollections of childhood are often distorted. Naturally, we apply filters to our thoughts and recollections, which can shift with context and time. Uniquely, this did not occur with Jimmy. The adult James was able to recall these early experiences, thoughts, and wishes. Jimmy did not want to move. He dreaded starting over in a new and an unfamiliar place. Why were his parents turning his life upside down? Why did they ignore his protests? The day they left, Lori Bidwell remembers Chris and Jimmy's faces in the window of the car, Chris screaming and Jimmy with tears running down his cheeks. Quote, "Jimmy sat alone in the back of the van as they left, watching his home, then his neighborhood, Then whole years of his short life disappear. No one noticed that he tore a stiff piece of cardboard from the box and began carving his wrist." End quote. The family moved into their new Spanish-style home in Ranchero Penasquitos, a suburb of San Diego with a population of 55,000 residents. The area features rolling hills and open spaces, with the nearby Los Peniquitos Canyon Preserve. James recalls his mom asking him about that cut on his wrist, which he said was just a paper cut. After the shooting, he confessed to Dr. Reed about having cut himself, saying that he just wanted to keep it private. Bob and Arlene hoped that Jimmy would make new friends that summer, and certainly when middle school began. But unfortunately, that wasn't happening. Jimmy became more withdrawn. He spent most of his time reading in his bedroom and sometimes in the closet and playing video games. Wanting to help, Arlene introduced herself to some of the neighbors, hoping that they would have a son who could befriend Jimmy. And a few potential connections, they didn't pan out. She even took him to the local comic book store, hoping to meet kids who played Dungeons and Dragons. However, Jimmy preferred to play games online, engaging in, quote, pseudo-relationships with faraway, faceless people and their avatars, end quote. As the school year began, things didn't improve. Although Jimmy joined the school band and played soccer, he remained socially awkward. His academic performance was excellent, and while many of these boys enjoyed his company, they noticed his difficulties in social interactions. Eventually, he started playing Magic the Gathering with Earl, who became his best friend, and some other classmates. But the thing is, Earl never considered Jimmy his best friend. Jimmy was quiet, and he didn't easily warm up to others, and Jimmy had literally only been to Earl's house once. And a pattern developed, with James recalling one thing, but his friends recalling something very different. And one thing was clear. While Jimmy was accepted by his peers in Ranchero Peniquitos, he was not forming new relationships as he had when he was younger. The tight group of neighborhood kids running around Oak Hills, laughing and playing games, was not being recreated now. He admitted that he escaped the painful and awkward feelings when socializing by playing video games and focusing on his homework. In October 2001, Jimmy was 14 years old, and the family sought counseling at PsyCare. While sister Chris was adapting and thriving, Jimmy was struggling and angry at home. He even stressed out over using the phone, refusing to talk on it because his anxiety skyrocketed. Dr. Reed points out that many teenagers are socially awkward, and the bright kids often get labeled nerds or geeks. This is not abnormal, but it does raise the question then, was Jimmy's behavior a normal expression of teenage angst, or was it pathological? Now, since Jimmy alone had access to his inner thoughts, which remember are malleable over time, it's really challenging to make a definitive assessment. His home life with parents and his sister was generally good, and the family was close-knit. Jimmy saw that his parents loved each other, and there were affectionate hugs, and he was included in them. However, Chris noticed that her brother was withdrawing, and he spoke to her less. While the family began attending the local Lutheran church, where both children participated in Sunday school, Jimmy would say that while he was never a believer, he was bribed to attend with the promise of Taco Bell. He also volunteered to help with the younger kids at Vacation Bible School. He was really good with them. In high school, Jimmy's social difficulties were intensified by the troubling and invasive thoughts that continued to evolve over time. He told no one. Despite this inner turmoil, he excelled in his advanced placement courses and participated in hour-long football games during lunch. Classmate Anthony Mai remembers Jimmy as a, quote, happy and smiling person who played soccer and ran cross-country, end quote. Although he was not a standout athlete, he played on the junior varsity soccer team. And neighbor Ilana Aronson recalls seeing Jimmy in the pool with the other kids. None saw the darkness that was hiding inside him. Aurora, Colorado, July 20th, 2012, just after midnight. Parents Rita and Agonat Moria took their teens, Patrice and Podio, to the movies, with Agonat nodding off during the previews. Suddenly, Podio saw flashes of red and yellow as gunshots rang out. Rita collapsed onto her husband, and Podio felt a sharp pain in his lower back. Scrambling, the family quickly escaped down a hallway, carrying Rita outside. At the hospital, they learned that Rita had been shot in her arm and leg, with her husband suffering an eye injury. Tending to Prodio's wound, it was determined he had been struck with shrapnel. The shrapnel would remain in Prodio's body until the 14-year-old underwent surgery a month later. But the family had survived. Inside the mind of Jimmy Holmes, there were images of atomic blasts and nuclear winter, thoughts creeping in when his attention ebbed. Intrusive thoughts of death and destruction intensified as he visualized killing anonymous people and even himself. This aligns with symptoms of an anxiety disorder, particularly obsessive-compulsive disorder, though Jimmy appears to have been more affected by the unwanted intrusive thoughts than by the compulsive behaviors. Generally, OCD begins in the teenage years, and it can worsen into adulthood, especially when one is under stress. You know, everyone experiences getting that catchy song stuck in your head from time to time. But when these types of thoughts negatively impact your life, it is important to see a therapist because there are effective treatments for OCD, medications, and therapies. And it can improve over time. And this is just so sad that he said nothing. James would tell Dr. Reed that he felt no hate, quote, just inner thoughts of killing people without any images attached, end quote. He had no specific enemies or targets beyond abstract concepts of humanity. He compared his feelings of hate to a child hating broccoli, not really intense or alarming. The teenage Jimmy believed that he made others uncomfortable, which could possibly lead to conflicts, and feared that this could escalate into violence, raising the specter that someone could be killed if his anger slipped out of control. He worried that his emotions could either hurt or drive others away. He also made a personal vow to never be angry with his mom, reasoning, quote, that if a kid gets really angry at his mother, she might treat you differently and maybe ignore you, end quote. The truth is that his intrusive nuclear winter thoughts are thinly suppressed anger that was beginning to spiral beyond his control. As this worsened, he mentally defended against the anxiety and anger by freezing, his description. In this state, he would stop talking, moving, or reacting to any of his imagined confrontations. And later, it got worse with violent imagery accompanying these freezing moments. Decapitations, saws acting of their own accord to saw off people's limbs. Now, these saws symbolized Jimmy's feelings, but Holmes did not recognize any psychological connection between them and himself. It is essential to recognize that when we examine one's unconscious mind, this is hard for everyone, primarily because it lies beyond our conscious awareness. Additionally, if our daily thoughts can be frightening, then our unconscious thoughts are even more terrifying. Again, I keep saying this, but it's important to understand that this kind of imagery in adolescence is not all that uncommon, nor does it necessitate severe psychological issues. When we experience anxiety, our minds will often create scenarios that make us feel safer, seeking to eliminate a threat. So as a result, we might blame others or resort to denial, the defense mechanisms kicking in. Dr. Rachel Gurr was a prominent psychiatrist for the defense and believes that this led Jimmy to think he was crazy. His inability to communicate serves as a defense mechanism to protect him from others discovering he was different, leaving him fearful of people, and that means everybody, all of humanity. James Holmes would tell his psychiatrists that he believed his thoughts of harming people prevented him from having suicidal ideation, although he adamantly told Dr. Lynn Fenton that he was not suicidal. Well, if it prevents him from having suicidal thoughts, then he wouldn't be suicidal, would he? Trying to navigate social situations distressed him, with him feeling trapped and unable to control the circumstances around him. But when busy, when engaged in schoolwork or playing games, the intrusive thoughts retreated. One of the reasons that he would develop a keen interest in neuroscience was because he wondered, is his brain different? And if he could study neuroscience, he could understand how and why these differences existed. Aurora, Colorado, July 20th, 2012, just after midnight. 27-year-old Matt McQuinn and his girlfriend, Samantha Yowler, were known for their elaborate Halloween costumes and playfulness, and they had moved to Colorado 8 months earlier. A friend noted, quote, "They were really devoted to each other, with a sparkle of love in their eyes," end quote. Eager to see the new Batman movie, Matt and Samantha were joined by her brother Nick. When gunfire erupted, Matt and Nick shielded Samantha, and while Nick was unharmed, Samantha wound up suffering a gunshot wound to her knee. But tragically, Matt McQuinn lost his life. His stepfather would tell the Dayton Daily News that it was just like Matt to sacrifice himself for Samantha. He was that kind of guy. By high school, Jimmy Holmes was a typical nerdy kid. He enjoyed math, science, and history, maintaining a GPA close to 4.0. He and his friends, mostly other guys, also loved playing StarCraft, and I was surprised to learn that he did not like first-person shooter games. While girls asked him out, which I was also surprised to hear, he always declined and responded to questions about being gay with, quote, "I don't fly that way," end quote. Jimmy would apply to several California universities, accepting a full scholarship to the University of California Riverside Honors Program. He also secured a competitive summer internship at San Diego Miramar College, learning about science labs. Plus, he interned at Dr. Terence Sajowski's computational neurobiology lab at the Salk Institute. There, Jimmy wrote computer code for an experiment on the human perception of time, which was mistakenly described as time travel after the shooting. At this program, Jimmy presented his project to a large audience looking perfectly normal. And while he faced mental health challenges, they did not overshadow his adolescence. His healthy mind took over, and Jimmy can be seen having fun in a number of videos taken over the years. At UC Riverside, Jimmy now preferred to be called James, focusing his attention on academics. Now, the freshmen lived in dorm suites, sharing bedrooms, bathrooms, and a living room with a microwave and a fridge. Then James spent 2 years in an on-campus apartment, studying and socializing with his dorm friends, and he visited his family during summers and the holidays. James and Ryan Lacroix became close friends, with Ryan noting that James was socially shy and he rarely initiated conversations. but their group enjoyed video gaming and watching Lost together all throughout college. Harry Soren Carr remembers James as a typical introvert who mostly socialized with fellow science majors, and he showed no interest in Batman or the Joker, despite the media buzz after the tragic shooting. So the lesson is clear. Don't believe everything you read and do your own research. James reflects on the college years as socially engaging, even though others often had to persuade him to attend parties. Eccentric, he rarely drank and never got drunk or high. He never used Twitter or Instagram. He rarely updated his Facebook. While he did experience the intrusive thoughts, his episodes of freezing had stopped. And though he knew young women, dating was not a priority for him. His first real date was after his sophomore year with a bubbly camp counselor, but nothing serious came of it. He also had a crush on another student, but he could only manage to say hello to her. But overall, no one at UC Riverside found him unusual. As he demonstrated in his youth, James excelled at his interactions with children, displaying genuine empathy. While at UC Riverside, he had volunteered at a Mexican orphanage called Corazón del Vida, giving out small gifts to the kids and playing soccer with them. Later, he worked as a camp counselor for underprivileged urban kids. He lived in the cabin with them, cared for their needs, and guided them in activities. When asked about his feelings of working with these youngsters, he struggled to express them and really couldn't recall any individual child. His supervisor, Kevin Wright, remembered him as a good counselor with a warm, goofy personality. 2 years after graduating UC Riverside, James Holmes was, quote, intensely planning his mission, selecting an adult setting, dismissing venues such as schools where children were likely to be present. He deliberately picked a time at the Century 16 Cinema, midnight, when small children probably wouldn't be there, end quote. But unfortunately, he was wrong. James found undergraduate school much more enjoyable than graduate school, where he faced increased public speaking demands that caused him serious anxiety. Well, I kind of felt that way in grad school. He worried about saying the wrong thing, and he often fixated on his perceived flaws, which highlighted his self-centeredness. Focused inward, the violent fantasies continued, and James sought to study normal people, comparing them with himself. To distract himself, he continued to study intensively, keeping the intrusive thoughts at bay. Dr. Rachel Gurr would suggest that he was psychologically deteriorating during this time, noting signs and symptoms of emerging delusions. Between 2009 and 2010, James applied to 8 doctoral neuroscience programs at varying universities. This is a rigorous application process that required excellent grades, a high score on the GREs, letters of recommendation, evidence of college participation, and a personal statement, among other factors. James was in the top 1% of UC Riverside graduates, was recognized as a Regent Scholar, a Dean Fellow, and a member of Phi Beta Kappa. However, his personal statement, which mentioned clairvoyance as a problem-solving method, hurt his application. Of 8 universities, 7 turned him down, with only UC Irvine granting him an interview, which ultimately led to another rejection. Despite graduating summa cum laude, he struggled to find a job and moved back in with his parents, and his life soon centered around sleep, TV, and video games, frustrating his mother Arlene, who urged him to contribute to the household. She warned him if he didn't get a job soon, he would have to move out. In October 2010, James began working at Miracal Inc., operating a pill coating machine during second shift. While his supervisor viewed him as a competent employee who avoided workplace drama, his coworkers found him standoffish and arrogant. One speculated that he might be mentally challenged, while a human resource manager suspected he could be on the autism spectrum. After seeing him in a corner laughing to himself, he earned the nickname the Giggler. After 3 months, he quit, ready to apply to neuroscience graduate programs again, receiving 4 interview offers. He withdrew from one and rejected another. At the University of Iowa, with one positive result, the rest of the interview feedback described him as, quote, bizarre, disconnected, and aloof, with a global lack of effort, end quote. And a psychology professor urged the administration not to admit him under any circumstances. Oh, God. At the University of Illinois, James received mixed reviews again, as his odd personal statement included, quote, the complexities of the long-lost me-thought seemingly arise out of nowhere into a stream of awareness, and the seemingly infinite vastness of indefinite knowledge, end quote. Didn't he have anyone proofread? Because what? What does that even mean? You can see his thoughts are not perfectly clear. But anyway, the University of Illinois accepted James. He also interviewed at the University of Colorado, Amidst medical campus. During this interview, he met with 7 faculty members who shared their observations, and I'm paraphrasing now. Scientific accomplishments are without question probably the top student recruit on paper. Concerns about his maturity and/or interest. Did not take the interview seriously at all. Disappointing. Overall, very positive. Good interview, good test scores. Interesting candidate with loads of potential. Quirky character, but what good scientist isn't? Very shy. This can come off as disinterested in a group setting. That does sound mixed as well, but James was offered a tuition waiver along with a $26,000 annual stipend from the National Institute of Health, which he accepted. He flew to Denver and he rented an apartment. Then he returned to San Diego and loaded up his Hyundai. His parents bid him a big farewell and off he went to Aurora. Aurora, Colorado, July 20th, 2012, just after midnight. Movie buff Alex Sullivan was celebrating his 27th birthday going to see The Dark Knight Rises with some co-workers, including Christina Blanchet. A big-hearted guy, he was smart and funny, making him a popular bartender who loved his wife Cassandra. While watching the movie, Christina initially thought someone was pulling a stunt until she heard the metal clinks of a tear gas canister, followed by gunshots. Sounds she recognized from her time serving in Iraq. Ducking for cover, Christina felt a burning sensation in her right leg and then saw blood gushing in front of her face. Panicking, she fell to the ground and saw that Alex had been shot in the head, but she couldn't get to him. Using her jeans, she fashioned a tourniquet to staunch her own bloody wound, recalling, quote, it felt like an eternity, but it could have been just 30 seconds for all of this to happen, end quote. Christina sustained 3 gunshot wounds to her legs and underwent 5 surgeries, resulting in her left leg being 2 inches shorter than her right. And Alex Sullivan died. The Amidst medical campus of the University of Colorado in Aurora covers 230 acres, featuring medical schools in every field, laboratories, and hospitals. Holmes' apartment was within walking and biking distance of the neuroscience labs and just 3 miles from the Century 16 movie theater. The area also had additional apartments, an elementary school, small restaurants who catered to the students, trainees, and staff. His apartment was basic, equipped with a TV, computer, and several posters featured zombies, pulp fiction, and scantily clad women. It was orderly, but it lacked personal touches except for a Batman mask and a plant he affectionately called plenty. He certainly was not a creative guy. Still avoiding the telephone, James only communicated with his parents through email, with Bob offering his son fatherly advice, and Arlene's emails were warm and motherly, asking how he was doing and expressing that they all missed him. When informed that the family dog, Rockster, had died, he responded writing, quote, "That's too bad. At least he had a good home," end quote. Very significantly different from when he was crying alone in a tree when Zuby passed. James participated in neuroscience classes and a 10-week laboratory rotation, 3 in total. These programs allow students to meet different professors and explore various research projects, helping them to decide where to focus their efforts. After each rotation, students move to a new lab. With fewer than a dozen students in the graduate classes, this offers valuable exposure to each lab. And since James was immersed in science, his differentness didn't really stand out. Cammie Kennedy, the neuroscience staff liaison for students, would see James several times over the months going forward and thought he was quirky, quote, "a cute little geeky kid, shy and extremely intelligent," end quote. During his first rotation, James conducted research on Mongolian gerbils. However, Professor Klug found him to be unmotivated and putting forth only a minimal effort. Now, occasionally it was necessary to euthanize a gerbil, which is a humane and regulated process. But James did not appear to enjoy this task or relish in killing them. James now formed a friend group with Ben Garcia, Tim Tapscott, and Gargi Datta, a bioscience graduate student from India. The alpha of the group, Gargi, organized their social activities, with James participating in dinners, board games, and hiking on Saturdays. Noticing James's shyness, Gargi invited him to a horror film festival, and soon they were dating. They met a few times a week to watch movies or play games, and James may have lost his virginity to Gargi, who was really his only girlfriend, although he mentioned to Dr. Fenton that he paid for sex on occasion. Ben was his best friend, and they often vented to each other about their dislikes, with nothing out of the ordinary noted. And again, James was never seen to be drunk or high by anyone. The second lab rotation began in November. His professor, Marc Delacroix, noted that although he was socially awkward, everyone says this, he could come out of his shell. However, James exhibited a poor work ethic, dedicating little time to the memory project research. During this time, he would join his lab mates at the campus pub, but continued to isolate himself afterwards. He was required to do presentations before his peers and faculty, and he tried to force humor, so it fell flat. Well, ultimately, Delacroix gave him a passing grade of a B, which is not great, as a C is failing in most graduate programs. It's likely that he was struggling with his mental illness, which was hindering his ability to focus on increasingly complex science. Now, Dr. Reed believes the descent into madness theory does not fully explain James Holmes' actions. Many of the reports about him surfaced after the shooting, during a time when the press and social media were rampant with sensationalism, rumors, and suggested explanations. In such an environment, people can easily become caught up in the hype, leading to exaggeration and inaccurate statements about the man they knew. Keep in mind, the videos of his presentations show a perfectly normal grad student. However, I believe his psychosis was deepening. In November, his friend Tim Tapscott, a recreational shooter, went shopping for a Glock Model 26 9mm pistol, and Gargi and James, who had never shown an interest in guns, went with him. During Christmas 2011, James visited his family and reconnected with his UC Riverside friends, appearing just fine to everyone. But shortly afterwards, he was diagnosed with mild mononucleosis, which can leave anyone feeling run down. And while this might explain the decrease in his lab effort, it did not account for his psychological state. Outside of his lab work, his coursework and presentations were excellent, earning him an A in his winter neuroscience class, and his texts with his friends all seemed perfectly normal. By early 2012, however, conversations with Ben Garcia hinted that he was struggling mentally, but nothing indicated the tragedy that he would unleash in July. Later during their sessions, James told Dr. Reed that he was still experiencing violent intrusive thoughts, and he now was seeing troubling images in the room around him, hallucinations. Initially, he blamed these on the stress of having the mononucleosis, but he did text Ben about vague psychotic delusions, the only detail being that he wasn't hearing voices. The content of this hallucination was secret, leaving Ben unsure of its seriousness. And over the next few months, James would continue to keep many secrets. On Valentine's Day 2012, James made dinner for Gargi, his French fried onion chicken, vegetables, and ice cream for dessert. He also lit some candles for ambiance, more for his enjoyment than hers. But by the end of the month, Gargi broke up with James. She didn't feel he engaged in intellectual conversations, he tried too hard to be cool, and ultimately, she did not see a future with him. James accepted her decision and agreed that their future together would, quote, probably lack ample conversation, end quote. James had really cared more for Gargi than she did him. He had cooked for her, he said he loved her, but she never felt close to him. But still, James appreciated the experience of love and caring for someone, and they would remain friends with benefits for a few more weeks. Late February into early March, James was seeing shadows that weren't really there. Alone in the lab, he noticed them in his peripheral vision, and they often appeared to be dancing figures. At night, after turning the lights off, he saw the shadows with guns and others that seemed to juggle its head. They didn't scare him. He knew they were harmless shadows that vanished when he stopped focusing on them, but he wanted to understand what they were. Aurora, Colorado, July 20th, 2012, just after midnight. Michaela Medic, or Kayla as her friends and family called her, was a 23-year-old saving up for a trip to India while attending the Community College of Aurora. On Facebook, she wrote, quote, that she was just a simple, independent girl who's trying to get her life together while still having fun, end quote. Kayla was the youngest of 3 children, and her parents anxiously awaited news for her when word of the shooting broke. Greg Medic agreed, after the medical examiner agreed to honor a specific request, that she go, quote, down there and squeeze Michaela's hand and tell her mom and dad love her and it's not going to hurt, end quote. Their sweet angel girl Kayla Medic loved fairies, Hello Kitty, and Beanie Babies. Spring break 2012. James told his mom that his relationship with Gargi had become complicated. Quote, we are seeing each other somewhere between friends and a relationship, end quote. Although he was feeling depressed, he still valued his connection with Gargi, even if it was noncommittal. At the same time, his core group, Tim, Ben, Gargi, and James, had begun to drift apart due to differing course loads. Gargi expressed concern for his well-being and encouraged him to see a therapist, which he agreed to do. On March 16, 2012, James met with counselor Margaret Roth at UC Denver Student Health Services. He shared his social anxiety, recent breakup with his girlfriend, trust issues, and his habit of pulling at his hair. He also mentioned thoughts of harming others, but he had no specific person in mind, and he never acted on these feelings. Roth found him difficult to engage, as he often avoided eye contact and stared off into space. She diagnosed him with obsessive-compulsive disorder and did not consider him dangerous. She would refer him to psychiatrist Dr. Lynn Fenton, medical director of the Anschutz campus student mental health clinic. She emailed Fenton, quote, "He's the most anxious guy I have ever seen and has symptoms of OCD. Most concerned that he has thoughts of killing people, though I do not think he is dangerous. He said he didn't want to tell me everything he was experiencing, as I might have to report," end quote. On March 21st, James Holmes met Dr. Lynn Fenton, who noted his poor eye contact. After long bouts of silence, he discussed symptoms such as anxiety, depression, low energy, difficulty concentrating, which had worsened since his breakup with his girlfriend. He admitted to some harmless compulsions and intrusive thoughts of killing. He revealed that in one fantasy, he considered homicide as a solution to his, quote, "biological problems," end quote, but recognized he couldn't possibly kill everyone, so ultimately this would fail to improve anything. With her stomach clenched, James appeared cold and predatory, and he was unfazed by these thoughts of murder. Quote, "His flat monosyllabic tone made me uneasy. His words fell out of his mouth like Scrabble tiles. He then painstakingly rearranged to form a whole sentence. His speech was so slow, I wasn't sure he'd actually finished formulating his thought," end quote. Fenton drilled deeply into these violent thoughts during her first session with Holmes, who denied having any specific plans or targets. Like Roth, she concluded he was not dangerous, but certainly required more therapy. Her diagnosis was obsessive-compulsive disorder, social phobia, and schizoid personality disorder. This condition involves persistent social detachment, limited emotional expression, and eccentric thinking, making it difficult for the individual to form relationships. And after considering antipsychotic medication, she prescribed anxiety and depression meds, scheduling a new appointment. Meanwhile, James's text with Gargi took a turn. Their usual chatty exchanges, filled with dark humor, now focused on his fantasy about killing, with a philosophical tone about them. For example, here's one exchange. Quote, "James, well, what I feel like doing is so evil, I can't do it." Gargi, "What's so evil that you want to do?" James, "Kill people, of course. That's why I live in the future. There's no way to do it and not get caught. The only way justice can be served is by taking away your time or life." End quote. He now explained to her his theory of human capital, an important concept to him, a delusion that would fix in his psyche. So, some people earn $1 million while others earn 100,000, but life itself is precious. Taking someone's life prevents their purpose, and it boosts one's own perceived value, his own human capital. Well concerned about this mindset, Gargi shared their texts with Ben Garcia, and although Ben's relationship with James was souring, Ben still wanted to help. Neither believed that James would become violent, especially since he was now in therapy. Aurora, Colorado, July 20th, 2012, just after midnight. Denise Trainum and Brandon Axelrod had just returned from their honeymoon when they went to the suburban Denver theater with their friend Joshua Nowland. Then shots were fired, with them quickly dropping on the floor behind their seats. Brandon was hit multiple times in the leg, and Denise shot in the buttocks. They considered running, but Joshua Nowland shouted that it was just too dangerous. Moments later, Joshua felt a burning sensation in his calf, as if a rusty nail had pierced his leg. He saw a gaping hole in his arm and feared it had been severed. Denise quickly made a tourniquet from clothing to try to stabilize the arm. After what felt like an eternity, the police arrived, with Joshua urging them to help the more seriously wounded first. Over the next few months, Joshua Nolan had several skin grafts and surgeries on his arm and leg. Today, he walks with a cane. Denise and Brandon had both survived. Throughout March and April, Ben and James texted, sharing dark thoughts and humor related to video and board games. But James also referred to himself as a psychotic being with delusions. Was James being serious about this, or was it just banter? Well, Ben didn't take it too seriously, because they were referencing the TV show Highlander, where immortal Scotsmen try to behead each other and take their power. April 3rd was his third visit with Dr. Fenton. He was less anxious, but still lacked energy and often forgot things during lab presentations. In response, she adjusted his meds. And while he was reserved and still had poor eye contact, he did smile a little bit, and he joked about the lab experiments. He was still maintaining a strong performance in his coursework, and he earned an A in neuroscience class. James had now begun texting another student, Hillary, and their conversation quickly became flirtatious. He invited her to go hiking, which she eagerly accepted. And it's very obvious that he felt more comfortable texting with a person than talking to a person. For example, he texted her, quote, "As if you could really get hotter than you are now," end quote. And he sounds like a normal guy to me. On April 17th, he had his fourth appointment with Dr. Fenton. He had ended his friends with benefits relationship with Gargi because he was pursuing a connection with Hillary. Although he was taking meds, he was still experiencing intrusive thoughts about killing people. This session, Dr. Fenton noted, quote, "Won't answer regarding plans. Homicidal ideation thoughts, suicidal ideation," end quote. When he asked her about her philosophy of life, Dr. Fenton redirected him back to his own, which upset James. He accused her of being a pill pusher, and though his voice rose slightly, he did not behave overly angry. Fenton now described his thinking as, quote, "psychotic level of thinking, guarded, paranoid, and hostile thoughts he won't elaborate on. Very tentative therapeutic relationship," end quote. She now diagnosed him with schizotypal personality disorder, which involves more obvious disconnections from reality and more obvious eccentricities. Regarding safety, Dr. Fenton noted that there was no imminent threat and expressed more concern about his homicidal ideation than his suicidal thoughts, as he remained very guarded and uncommunicative about his feelings. And all good things must come to an end, and this is where I have to conclude episode 130. Just wanted to keep it private. Part 1, On a Dark Night in Aurora, by Dr. William H. Reed. I know it's very disturbing as we delve into his mind and his activities, but in part 2, episode 131, Ultraception, which will be out in 2 weeks, James Holmes continues therapy, but his mental health continues to worsen, with him not sharing his plans with his therapist. And thanks to my amazing supporters on Patreon, our next book, here comes the announcement, is A Tangled Web, a cyber stalking, a deadly obsession, and the twisting path to justice by Leslie Rule. She is the daughter of renowned true crime author Anne Rule, and I had the pleasure of meeting Leslie at Crimecon a few years back, where her enthusiasm and vitality was amazing. So on a bleak, chilly November day in 2012, 37-year-old Carrie Farver vanished without a trace from her life in Omaha, Nebraska. Shocking everyone, she quit her job and left her young son behind, igniting a firestorm of concern and speculation. Yet her mother, Nancy Rainey, steadfastly refused to accept that her daughter had simply walked away from everything she loved. Brace yourself for one of the most intricate and bewildering true crime stories I have ever encountered. See, Vicky, I promised you that we would get to this compelling story. So I'll see you all in Crimecon Denver. We will meet up at the Embers Lodge Bar on Friday night around 9 o'clock, and I'll be posting updates on Patreon. Thank you for listening. I truly appreciate you joining me on this journey through some of the best true crime books, and I know this one is difficult. If you enjoy the podcast, please share it and leave a positive 5-star review. You can contact me at jill@murdershelfbookclub.com or connect with me on X, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Additionally, you can join my Patreon for $4 a month and help us choose the next book and enjoy my serial killer class. I'll see you in 2 weeks, Murder Bookies.
Do you love horror movies, both old and new? Are you the kind of cinephile who finds beauty in blood-curdling screams, atmospheric shadows, and the evolution of fear on film? Then you've just found your next obsession. Welcome to Journey with a Cinephile, a horror movie podcast where every week I deep dive into the dark corners of cinema, reviewing classic horror, modern nightmares, and everything in between. From the fog-soaked moors of Universal horrors to the neon-drenched nightmares of today's indie darlings, I explore how horror has evolved and what it says about us and why we just can't look away. Each episode features thoughtful reviews, deep dive discussions, and a celebration of horror's rich history, perfect for longtime fans and curious newcomers alike. So whether you're a vampire aficionado, a slasher junkie, or someone just looking for their next scare, join me on the journey. Journey with a Cinephile, a horror movie podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts.
Written and produced by Jill, all rights reserved. Music, The Pewter Elephant by Blue Dot Sessions.